Thanks so much for joining us for today's edition of Love Thy Body. Today, I've got a special guest for you guys. She's a really good friend of mine. She is a sexologist, a Twitch orgasm expert, and a really interesting person. I mean, you're just going to see, I can't even explain it. When you see this conversation, you will understand what I'm talking about. The incredible, the informative, the interesting Nikki Morgan. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate you coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your podcast. You know how much I love having conversation with you. And if you don't, now you do.
Thank you. We always do have great conversations. And we're going to have one for the people today so they get to see a little bit of why I thought you were so great. I had to bring you on.
Okay.
So tell everyone a little bit about what you do so they can get an overview. And then we'll take things from there.
Sure. So my name is Nikki Morgan, and I am a clinical sexologist. I'm a speaker. I'm an educator. I also am an immersive experience curator, and I use that skill set in particular for learning and transforming sexual energy, having breakthroughs and transformational perspectives to open up how we move with our lives in sexuality and everything connected to it, which is everything.
Yeah. So naturally, one's gonna start off like, how did you find that? Like, start from the beginning. So, like, what was life for you like growing up? Where did you grow up? What was that?
Sure. Well, I'm a Brooklyn born and raised.
Where Brooklyn at? Where Brooklyn at? Where Brooklyn at?
Where Brooklyn at? Why you you know, that's all you need. So yeah, born and raised in Brooklyn, first generation here. So my parents are not born in America. I'm Jamaican and Haitian, so I grew up in that culture, and in Brooklyn, it's very rich.
Out in the streets, they call it murder.
You don't want to romp with me. So, and just that alone kicked it off. Really, being born in America to a Haitian and Jamaican family, that's what kicked it off. I will say for my more spiritual and more all time is now people, I do believe that this was a purpose that I was just born into, because there was never a time that was not a conversation. The observation of different cultures, and what I grew up with versus what was so shameful in America, is what stood out to me. In my household, and I grew up mostly on my Jamaican side, but the body was not a challenge in the way that America sees the body. So wearing a short skirt, or showing a lot of skin, or twerking, as people call it now, that when I was young, we were just dancing, winding up our waist, skinning out,
It was booty shaking out here. It was just straight up booty shaking.
It was just booty shaking. Okay. Right. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So, so all those things were very regular. Those things were very normal. You know, who's able to, you know, stand on their hands or their head and be able to tick, 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 tick your waist. Like we were very familiar with our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started going to school and I really got integrated into American culture, you know, the reactions were very jarring. So it was definitely from my childhood, it was something to say, oh, okay, I should pay attention to this. And then it continued. You know, I went to Catholic school until I was in fourth grade. And, you know, those conversations also began where I was in Catholic school, and they were using what I'm gonna refer to as corporal punishment, where if you can have a spelling test, and if you got two wrong, then when the spelling test got passed out, you got lashes for every one you got wrong. And you know, so the perspective of what pleasure was, and what celebrating uh, things that were right it also didn't matter the way it does now, as an adult, as us winning, or as a direction towards pleasure. Because growing up in that school, there really wasn't. It was just a matter of, are you gonna get a little bit of punishment or a lot of bit of punishment? You know what I mean? So I think that was also catalyst in making me start to just accept things as they are, and really not even have a direction of whether things need to be pleasurable or not. And so it made me curious why everyone was so angry about other things as I got older. I didn't understand what the stereotypical, you know, angry Black woman was, until I started hearing that from others outside of my family. And so it just continued. And I noticed very much so that the core of it, as I began to grow, was sex, and at the time, religion. Um, I was going through some of my old things, and I found a paper that I wrote in fifth grade. And at the time, the Pope was infallible. That was one of the rules. It's since now been diminished, but I wrote a whole paper on whether the Pope was a religious leader or a politician. And this is the things that I was thinking about when I was in fifth grade. So it just continued, and it got deeper, and I wanted to understand and learn more about the world, because my core search was just for more playmates.
Mm.
More playmates, that's it, just more playmates. So what do you need to feel better so that we can play? That's right. It. That was the core.
So let me stop you, because
Sure.
There's so many places I could go. And to answer the question, the Pope is both a politician and
my fifth grade self thanks you.
Yeah. It's definitely its own sort of parliament, House of Congress, once you start to get to that level of religion.
Yeah.
But as you're talking about wanting playmates, what were some of your earlier experiences being aware of your body and becoming aware of sex and sexuality?
What was my... Can you repeat that?
Yeah, like when did you start becoming aware of yourself sexually? And what was that process like?
So
considering you're in this duality, this dual environment.
yeah. So it was so well integrated that I didn't have like a moment. And what I mean by that is, I mean, my body was very well developed early on. I started my moon cycle when I was 9. Um, I started, my breast started to develop when I was in 3rd grade. And by 5th grade, I had a D cup. I looked like an adult. I had very, very grown men wanting to talk to me on the street. Um, and my my responses to that were just very balanced because, again, growing up in my Jamaican household, these things were not things that, it's a matriarchal society, my Jamaican household, right? So my Jamaican culture, excuse me. So if any man or any person acts out of pocket to this woman, right, or this vessel that is reflecting to you as a woman, um, we just check you. We just check you if you need to be checked. We know we could see through it if, oh my goodness, baby boy, you don't even know what you're doing right now. Like it's just so I always had the proper response to balance myself. If someone was more or less aggressive. Um, I By the time I was 13, I was already in the mindset, I already was starting to, no, I started to self-pleasure. I discovered self-pleasuring at maybe 9 or 10, and that was just from just rubbing on a pillow, and really discovering that. But even that was when I discovered orgasm, actually. That's when I discovered orgasm, around 9 or 10, because previous to that, riding bikes, you rub up against, so your clitoris may feel a little something, so you feel pleasurable, and it's not anything that is other. It's all very integrated. No one made me feel shame about it. My family, I grew up in a house full of women, so we all joked about things. There was my aunt, who is very outspoken, very, very outspoken. I remember coming home one day, and in 5th grade, and she goes, "Where you titty them so big for? You have someone sucking pan them?" And for those that didn't understand what I meant, all she said was,
You
"Why
got
your
big titties?
breath so big, huh?"
Why do you have those big titties? Is someone sucking on them?
Right, exactly, yes. And they're jokes, but it's all jokes, right? And so the humor was always in my household. There was never a body shaming conversation. And in fact, even in the Jamaican household, um, well, no, there is a little bit of a flip in American culture. So Jamaican culture, to be voluptuous, to have weight, to be a big mompy, is sought after, or not even sought after, but just very accepted. It's seen as something that is that's very highly
Appreciate
appreciated. Thank you.
it.
And then if you happen to be very thin, um, then there are conversations about MAGA and Twiggy and things of that nature. So there was a bit of an opposite, but again, because of how the culture is, even if someone did come at you on, you too skinny or whatever it was, um, the culture, our words are very, we speak in a lot of metaphors, and we are really good at roasting. We're very good at roasting. um, sometimes to a violent point in the roasting. So, you know, there's balances in that culture. But anyway, by the time I was 13, I had already been, no, between 12 and 13, I was already in my mind thinking, who do I want to engage in my first sexual experience with? And I was choosing, I was thinking, I was interviewing. People didn't know I was doing that, but that's what I was doing. Um, uh, you know, there was heavy petting that was happening, and or making out, as a lot of people call it. And I would notice, oh, someone, you know, I told that person not to put their hand up my shirt. They took their hand away, but then they put their hand back up after I asked them not to. Oh, that person can't do it. Nope, because that person don't even listen to me. Like, these were conversations I already was having. You know, and I didn't recognize at that time the value of my knowledge of what consent was. So I had chosen who the partner was going to be after a few thoughts and very deep consideration. So I've always been very intentional about not just my sexual interactions. And by the way, I look at everything as sex. But for the sake of our conversation and sex being other, I would be very highly intentional with my sex, my sexual interactions, and everything else for that matter. And I would always ask the questions, well, why? Well, why can't I hang out with a group of boys and ride bikes and hang out on the street? And why do I need to play with this little white Barbie that don't look nothing like me? You know, don't look nothing like anybody I know. You know what I mean? So I was always very conscious of that. So it just very much, it was all very integrated. By the time I was my late teens, I got into managing dancers, exotic dancers, uh, private events, private home parties.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and while I was doing that, I was still a very good student. I, you know, I got my awards. I was recognized for all of these things, these documents. Um, I, I had a lean in on law for a little while. Um, Went to the Supreme Court and was able to hang out with them for a little while. And even that I didn't really appreciate at all. I didn't. I should have. I have a picture of me. Well, all the other candidates are there, and I'm the only candidate that looks like me, and my face is just, it's a screw face. It's like, I don't even want to be here. So almost resenting my mind and my skill. And then I went to international sales at a watch company. I was traveling a lot. This is my early 20s. And I was very good at talking on the phone to my international clients for sales. And I had the phone voice that I didn't recognize either. I and so that voice, I think, also assisted in me being really good at what I did. So, I was also very much in my divinity by then, in my sexual divinity by then. By then, I had understood orgasm in a way that, with lovers, that really made me invincible. I would show up to work an hour late and everyone else would be upset, but my work always got done and it never interrupted anything. And that was also what I noticed, because of my sexuality, because of just our fear of it. Sometimes it doesn't even allow people to see things just as they are, which is all right, which is what, what's happening now. Like, if the work is getting done, if it's successful, if it's meaningful, if it's useful, then does the bureaucracy need to be? So when that voice started to kick in, someone asked me if I would do calls at an escort service, and screen calls at an escort service. And I was like, no, I'm making enough money, I'm good. and and the friend said to me, well, the owner thinks that Black people are lazy and that they steal. And, because of what I was already on since 5th grade, I was like, oh yeah? All right, let me meet this lady.
Psychology on you.
Huh?
I used a little psychology on you.
She definitely did. 1000%. 1000% she did. So I went. And also, I mean, she did, but also, this is the flow, right? We move to what we are truly attracted to. So so I went there, and my interview was a trial of the calls. And I made that woman double the money that she usually even charges. And just playing. I did not know what I was getting into. I was just playing on the phone, playing some voices, using my imagination like I already do. And so because of that, she welcomed me. It started out, I was just doing, on the weekends, answering calls, really still not understanding the gravity of what I was doing, not understanding. Because I still had the human ignorance, of I didn't have that experience. I'm still working at this international, doing international sales at this company, but then at the same time, on the weekends, I'm doing this calling, and it's all the same to me, all the same. And now I'm this 21, 22, 23-year-old making mad like dollars from left and right, also not recognizing what that gravity is either. Just moving through it. Also at the same time, I'm meeting some adult industry friends who are in the video aspects of things, producers. I have girlfriends girlfriends who are not in this at all, and these are people that are in the music industry who are friends of mine, who are coming to visit me just to say hi, and there's like sex being recorded in the back, and like we're talking. I remember one incident in particular. A girlfriend of mine came to visit me, and I wanted to give her something, and there's like loud sexual going on in the background, and it didn't occur to me how uncomfortable it was for someone that's never been in it. So yeah, so so it was something that I recognized, because of course I want the people that I love in my life to be comfortable. So I started to really pay more attention to these things. And then things got a little hot at the escort service. When I say hot, meaning at that time there was what we were calling now the Craigslist killer.
Uh-huh.
And while or Craigslist strangler, I think it's Craigslist killer, but and the escort service that I was screening at, we never used Craigslist or any of those publications to connect to clients. But what we did do, we had the women that were working with us, who were friends of some of these women that use Craigslist. So when we did when we did in calls, which in calls are when the client will come to you, and instead of you going to the client, there was next door to one of the women that we worked with, someone got strangled and killed. And it was someone who was doing in calls, and it was her friend. And she was answering her own calls. Now, when I answered calls, and I did not recognize at the time, I was also really honing a lot of the skill sets that I use still to today, where I use my divining abilities through sexuality, through orgasm. Orgasm allows us to have grander senses than just the five. And orgasmic energy is our primal energy. It's primordial energy. So these are skill sets that are born before we are physically born. So they took the whole floor in. And it was at that moment that I recognized that there is a huge unfairness that was happening. And this is my early 20-something brain, you know, before I really understood what was happening. And my timeline may be a little overlapped on something. And also, this is the first time I'm sharing this in recording with someone. So thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing the story.
Yeah. So the killers was going around and killing people, and I recognized how terribly unfair this life and this work was for these women. These were women that had become my family. These were women that depended on me to tell them whether or not the person that I'm saying, okay, go to this person, that they're not going to kill them, that they're not going to violate them in any way, that they are going to pay them for their time, that they are not an officer of the law or anyone that's looking to take them in. These were things that they depended on me for. And I was really, really good at it. I was really good at it because of my psychic abilities, because of my telepathic abilities, because of my ability to speak to everyone's higher selves beyond the face that they present. So speaking to people on the phone was really easy. And I had already started that ability from when I was working in the working at the international watch company. Yes, right. Yeah. And by that time I had been fired. By that time I had been fired, and it all transitioned very gracefully. I had been fired from the company because my girlfriend and we worked at the same company, and we always separated ourselves and never spoke to each other at the job because we're the only people that look like ourselves, and we wanted to make sure that you good, you know, and if we need to be friends with the people that we need to be friends with in order for us to protect ourselves, then let's do that, and then we'll meet on the flip side. But silly us in our early 20s, we were emailing each other, chatting the entire time on the work email.
Oh wow. Like they're not gonna see that.
Right, so nothing was secret. And you know, we didn't, you know, first real job, you know what I mean? And this was before, like this is also, internet tech wasn't as profound as it is now. So, you know, it's what it was. But it was still fine because after they fired us, I mean, it was okay. Like a bad day was $2,000 from the escort service, you know, and that was just my cut. So, you know, it was fine. There was no, it was actually freeing. So back to the killer, and the unfairness for these women, what I found was that instead of making sure are they okay, making sure that they weren't hurt, being concerned, they took them all in and kept them in holding. They didn't arrest them, but they kept them in holding for the entire night, for the entire night. And we could not get a hold of them. We could not see them. Um, and simply because of the work that they do, because that is not how you would treat anyone else that was not in that work, who was witness to or a friend of someone who just got strangled and killed next door to you. That is not how you would have been treated. So it was at that moment that I realized, okay, wow, things really started to get serious for me, and the owner of the escort service was getting very aggressive, because money was going down, and she was starting to talk to me in ways that I did not appreciate. And I'm also very clear on who I am. So so what I did was I just left the keys early in the morning, and I bounced and I ghosted on her. All of the women, this was not intentional, but all of the women that worked for her did not want to continue working for her because they did not feel safe, because they did not feel appreciated. So they called me, and as family, as friends, they asked, "Hey, can you get our phones for us? Can you still do what you're doing for us?" And so I said, okay, because I could not sit by and know that there's a killer out there, that they're out there working, and now their lives are in danger. And these are women that are paying for their homes, for their children, taking care of their grandparents. They got car payments. Like, these are regular people. And these were things, again, that hit me, that I'm just like, again, my early 20s, all of my ahas, all of my ignorance, all of my innocence, really started to take form in what was happening. So I continued to answer phones for them, and I readjusted the income piece so that they would get a little bit more, since my overhead was far less than what was happening. It was still very much business. It was still very much entrepreneurial. It's still regular work like anything else. And the stories that they told, oh my gosh, we have to share another time, but those stories are very inspirational, and it's by far nothing still till today. This is almost 20 years later, and it is still the conversation that still needs to be had on why this work is important. So it got to a point, though, where I started to have to really look over my shoulder. Now we had a lot of detectives that were smelling around us. They were smelling around us. They were, and then also you got to understand that there are a lot of different personalities that I'm also managing now, right? So and our business is starting to grow and become bigger. So the personality traits, now I'm dealing with all kinds of individuals, and some are joining this work because of their trauma. Some are joining the work because of their love of it. Some are doing it because of the need, whatever the reason is. And I had to manage all of those emotions, those traumas. And there was one young lady in particular, and I knew that she loved attention. So we planned we planned an event for it was a television company. It was a channel premiere. It was an event for a channel premiere. By the way, yes, by that time I had taken the business corporate, and so there was one event, and there were 12 of us at the event. I scheduled 12 of us. And I'm looking around, you know, I'm doing my networking thing while everyone is doing their thing and making sure everyone is okay, as I do till now. And I can't find one of the women that I'm working with. And I'm like, where is she? Where is she? I always have an eye on everybody. So I went looking for her and I found her in the back of the studio and she's on the phone. And I'm like, what are you doing on the phone? What are you doing? And she says, she puts on hold and she goes, it's the detective. He wants to ask me some questions. So I'm just answering some questions for him. and my flashbacks, like not my, I had visions because I get visions. I had visions of, first it triggered a Heidi Fleiss conversation. Then it triggered a vision of all of us getting lined up and taken out with handcuffs.
Yeah.
And everybody, not just anyone from my business, but everyone, the whole channel, right? Corporate, hi. So I said, get off the phone now. Get off the phone. She said, okay. She hangs up the phone. I said, girl, are you crazy? What are you doing? What are you doing? All right, you know what? Nah, you can't play no more. You cannot play no more. Nope. Because you are endangering everyone. I don't know how much you've already told this detective, and you're doing it while you're in the middle of work. What is going on? So that was my real wake-up call that things needed to shift dramatically. So I had to let them know. I weaned off, but I had to let the ladies know that we can't continue this. We're too compromised. There's too many things happening. So we had to stop. And from that point on, I said, I have got to put my life into adjusting this misunderstanding. These women risk their lives. They are not supported. This is not right. This is not right. This is not right for so many reasons. People have a right to pleasure. People have a right to sacred space where they can express themselves however they wish, in whichever way they want to, as long as it's with consent. And to even be challenged with the conversation around consent. And how can you even consent if you are already being marginalized? If you're already marginalized, then your consent is already taken away. So, you know, these things all hit, all like a ton of bricks when I made the decision to no longer continue that business. And I decided that I woke up one morning, I don't know what, again, I do know what, but I can't tell you anything physically or a trigger that happened outside of me other than all those things, where I got on the computer and I said, I have to find a way to make myself be able to talk about this freely, legally, and be a support in this and respected in this. And so I searched around. By the time when I was doing that, then there were no NYU, all of these little schools were not doing any kind of sexuality anything. In fact, America rarely had any. And there were two schools that were holding it down, and that was the Institute of Advanced Study of Human Sexuality, which was in San Francisco, and another, and that was Kinsey, the Kinsey Institute. So I decided to go to San Francisco because it would be far more diverse for a vessel that looks like this in interfacing in the social norms that are here in America. So I did that, and I started to go to school. And while I was going to school for that, and this was after I left Brooklyn College and St. John's, St. John's University. I I was also working in the music industry at the same time. So while I was going to school and the music industry, those things were paralleling, and it gave me more information of like, what are we doing? You know, the over sexualization of women, the even the business dynamics behind it. You know, I was so curious as to why were there no women executives, and if they were, what did that look like? And what it looked like was an abbreviation of emotional expression in every way, um, and so many other things that came out that I learned from this. Yeah, it was a lot. But I continued. After I left the music business, I was, and again, this was always transitional, always graceful. There was never a moment where I just dropped. There was never a moment where I suffered. There was never a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have, what am I going to do? And when that did happen, there was still something that always provided. So again, walking in that orgasmic energy always kept me in grace. Always, always, always. There's a lot of side conversations with everything that I'm telling you. Everything about learning abilities, how to exchange sexual energy, how to suck sexual energy, how to cultivate it. Um, how to use it in alchemy, in such a way that it's conscious. So many side conversations that happen with this, side situation, side experiences that were not. It's all, there's no side, but
And
in
this was
the
what you were learning in San Francisco, or was this things that you had been picking up along the way?
this was all on the way and in San Francisco. In San Francisco, when I started going to the institute, it was like someone hit me with glitter, fresh air, bubbles, love, orgasms, all of it, because I never understood what being a geek was. Shout out to Reed. Um, I never understood what being a geek was until I got to that school, because I was good at so many things. By the time, I mean, what I was singing at Carnegie Hall by the time I was in junior high school. I told you, I never appreciated being with the Supreme Court. I, I was doing international sales, and I was still just doing whatever I wanted. It didn't matter. I didn't have the eagerness, but I was doing it because I was already orgasmic. I was already just excited about life and open. But when I got to the institute and I was around all these people that I did not have to explain anything to, that I could grow upon a thought with, I mean, that in itself was an orgasmic continuum there. So the school, though, what the school did, it may not have given me, it didn't, it gave me, it gave me, it gave me a reference on how, on where I am. It gave me a reference on where I am in the world that we were creating. So that was really beautiful. That was really beautiful. It gave me information about how to communicate these feelings and these emotions. It gave me historical referencing and background. It gave me the understanding of how important experiential learning truly is. It gave me understanding of how collaboration is so very important. It gave me an understanding of the responsibility that you hold to yourself if you are in this career choice, because if you are not constantly working on yourself, if you are not constantly addressing your dark spaces, your shadow world, your sexual curiosities, your your level of openness and continuously questioning and decolonizing, shout out to Dr. Z, decolonizing yourself, you know what I mean, then you're not gonna be able to do the justice that you need to meet your clients or your groups or your students or your peers where you need to meet them, which in turn just is like life. You know what I mean? Like how do you show up to your whatever you're doing being your best? You know, how do we have and hold a world that we can be proud of if we're not taking the responsibility of showing up and doing our personal work? So the school impacted me a great deal. Unfortunately, it is closed now because of funding issues. But luckily, it seeded so many of me's, and so there are many other schools open. There are many classes. There are many workshops that people can. It burst, and just like death, you know, when that entity or that being transitions, all of the memories, all of the energy, all of what they were disperses and cycles out into all of us and lives in us however we need to continue that message. So yeah,
I want to
yeah, so that's,
I want to stop you there because there's a little bit of
sure, yeah, I'm talking a lot.
talking about death. I mean, it's interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing some of this information about you. So I'm sitting and listening and learning about you with everyone else at the moment. So there are things that in my research and just in our conversations I couldn't prep for in that way. So it's been very enlightening to see the person that I've gotten to know and hearing a little bit more of the origin story. So it's been particularly amazing. As you're talking about death, I mean, in this moment where we're dealing with a pandemic and lots of people whom have had a life that is interrupted and are having their lives shaken up, whether it's losing a loved one or like the young ladies that you worked with, having someone close to them taken away and not having the opportunity to deal with that. How does your work help, you know, that
Thank
conversation?
you. God, thank you for that question. What a gift. Thank you for that conversation. Thank you for that question. And I'm taking a moment to really thank you for that, because yes, we are filming right now in the middle of a pandemic, and I know that this will continue well past it. My work, to put it simply, is about presence. To put it really, really simply, it's about presence. When I talk about orgasm, when I talk about sexual pleasure, when I talk about bliss, when I talk about transitioning and transforming blocks that we have, I'm really giving you a skill set or a tool that assists you in any aspect of life, any aspect of life. So, and the skill set is moving our way towards presence, because when we are able to be in presence, then we are able to sit in and access our bliss state, access our most pleasurable selves, because that's where we come from. What I mean when I say that's where we come from, Sexual energy is, again, it's primordial energy. Sexual energy is what animates you, animates me, animates all that we see. Literally all that we see. Everything. The air we breathe, the atoms that are created, all of what we see. And so orgasm is a buildup of that energy in this vessel. And, or actually, it's the buildup and release of that energy of this vessel. So what is the difference between that and death? What is the difference between that and sorrow and grief? The buildup may feel different. It may feel differently. But when you release that buildup, when you forgive, think about when you forgive, when you forgive someone, you know when you forgive. You could say you forgive someone, but you know in your body if you really forgive someone. Because when you forgive, the tension goes away. And it's just like, all right, I get why you did that. I understand. You know, there's no more defense. It's giving yourself to that moment so you can understand it. It's surrendering yourself to that moment. It is a great surrender. It is a great surrender. Death is that. Death is that great surrender. As the vessel that is transitioning in addressing our fear of death. And then it's also in the effects of all that, of who we affect, and the sorrow and the buildup and the regret and the supposed to's and the withdrawals of what we feel because we lost someone. And the pandemic, while we are talking about a virus and not even the ability for it to kill, right? But the ability of its spread and us becoming so overwhelmed by the spread that we cannot support the ones that do need the support in the medical facilities, in the hospitals, and that's happening. That's happening. That's real. I have a family member that recently passed due to the virus, right? Or the effects of the virus, not the virus itself, but what the virus does to your body, right? So that's real. But the fear and the panic is the thing that is very contagious, and that is what's making the world go crazy. And the fear comes in all faces. So my work is absolutely connected to understanding ourselves in such a way that we no longer fear not only ourselves, not only our pleasure, not only each other, but we don't fear letting go of this life, because we are living our best all the time. So there should not be a fear, right? There shouldn't be a fear. Shouldn't be a fear, ideally. And then there's also our very physical and emotional aspects of ourselves that I go very deeply into, that is still also very connected to our sexuality, because in sexuality we deal with trauma and all that comes with it. So the death is actually, it's part of that trauma. It is. It's the withdrawal. It's fear of that letting go. Again, fear of that letting go. So fear of death, fear of loss, that's root chakra. That is foundational understanding of what and who we are, which are the tools that I assist with in understanding our sexuality. They're one and the same.
I mean, it's a powerful thought when you really analyze the impact of energy in that death can be as sweet a release as orgasm. And in theory, orgasm is death, because if the life that you release doesn't pollinate, it immediately dies. So there is a constant circle of life and energy and change that we see, that we experience on a cellular, molecular level. I mean, even when you think about plants, I know you're a plant lady. I live in Georgia, so it's spring, it's pollen season. It's nothing but tree sperm floating around everywhere. It's the same life, it's the replenishing. It's the burst, as you called it. A while ago, you said you see everything as sex. Can you explain to our audience what you mean by that?
Sure, I would love to. So once I started to engage my orgasmic walk,
Mm-hmm.
and really understand my build up and release relationship with everything, it then allowed me to walk backwards a little bit and see how where the seeding moments have been, where the gestation was, and then walking back even further before the seeding, being able to say, well, what was that first engagement? What was what aroused me about that engagement that allowed me to continue engaging? And then deciding on how I want to engage with it. And recognizing that I am a full participant in whatever I'm exchanging with another. So my relationship, in with everything, it changes, and I get to decide how pleasurable or how much pleasure I wish to derive out of all of these things. Almost in a way of challenging myself to navigate, always navigating towards that orgasmic space. Because that orgasm, as you say so eloquently, and thank you for saying it, is a death, right? And a rebirth, because it requires me to let go of everything that I thought I knew before, so that I can fully be present in this moment to allow myself this pleasure in this moment, whatever it might be. So even if I'm pissed off at somebody, right? Or we're having a fight of some kind, even in those moments, I am always here like, all right, so how do I want this to play out? Who do I want to be in this moment? Who do I want to be? So, so even in my arguments, even in my arguments, I choose how I want to be. So if I want to be this person today that is throwing that tantrum, then I'm gonna be that person. I'm gonna do it good, and I might get the reaction that I want out of you, but I may not. You might give me something else, and that in itself is that not sex? Is that not sex? Is that not us being able to engage? I mean, sometimes, I mean, I get it. When we look at sex separately, it's about, there's the negotiation that happens. And I get that. There is a negotiation. Well, actually, for some of my conscious sexers, there's a negotiation that happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen verbally the way a lot of people think. Sometimes the negotiation might be
Conversational. Tell me about
right.
what,
Yeah.
like, you know, oh, you like that? That's something you're interested in? Huh. Oh, you wish that would happen?
Oh, right. Exactly. No, no, no. And then that conversation says, well,
Wait a minute.
am I equipped to do stuff like that? Am I into that? I might be. Right, right. It's all set. It's just the conversation around, because sex is so separate, it's like there's this let go, that there's no that you don't have a right to to your own navigation of whatever it is that you're in. But this is where you really start to just get the knock on the door of our divinity, truly our divinity. But it requires us to first start to play with those things. So from first engagement, and first engagement is also pretty loaded, because even something that you think that you are just engaging with in front of you physically, you engaged with that well before you got to that physical space, because there were things that got you to that physical space beforehand. So we are ever changing. We're always in and out, up and down. We are truly infinite in that. If you can really understand that we do not have beginning and end, which again is part of the death life conversation. And so sex is everything in between.
Right. So I think what's interesting about that, the phrase that came to mind is, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's from a book I really like, The Art of Seduction. And in that book, it basically states that seduction is the ability to have pleasurable experiences and pleasurable movements throughout your life. And seduction isn't something that you turn on and off. It's something that stays on. So every moment of your life should be a seduction as much as possible. Every moment of your life should be a moment where you're not looking to make resistance, but you're making someone, you're seducing them. You're seducing the person at the register. You're seducing the person that's on the train. You're seducing the person at the cash register. You're treating them essentially in a manner that makes them feel warm, welcome, special, and attended. And that will, in turn, build your ability to maintain a seductive, sexual, aroused, pleasurable experience around your life. Um, that was a bit of a paraphrase, but that's just how I've received that information. So, what are some of the things that you do in your daily life to help with that seduction, that continual orgasmic state?
Mm, okay, I like that one. Okay, so there are it's okay. So one, again, just like when we were talking about first sexual engagement for me, it's very integrated. It's hyper integrated. It's all the time. So some of the things that I do, oh, you know what? I can give you a line to start from. I got I I was healing from a car accident, and the car accident affected my orgasm. Where if I if I had any kind of convulsion in my body down below my waist, my injury would be agitated for the next 2 and 3 days, and I was in great pain. So my direction of that pleasurable thing, my reference of where my divinity lies kind of diminished because now it was my hell. um, so I had to retrain myself. And by the way, when my orgasm became my hell, I became very pessimistic. I It was very challenged for me to see how to get out of things. It was very challenging to uh, to problem solve. Very, very hard. Um, so in understanding that and seeing myself in that way, I started to shift some things. So what I did to start to move myself back to flipping my hell back into my heaven, for duality purposes, even though we're far more, we're not in, we are multi-dimensional beings.
Right. It's not just a one-sided coin. There are many ways that that portal can take you to another place.
Yes, 1000%. Yes. But for the simplicity of this conversation, especially for people that they don't know what I'm talking about. That's why I'm using these examples. So what I started to do was, first meditation. Oh my God, meditation. Um, and meditation can come in any way. I enjoy I enjoy many different forms of meditation, but the one that really helped me first and foremost, um, was my sound meditation. Because and my sound meditation, not from outside sound but from myself. So what I would do is, I would just take a deep breath in, and then I would breathe out sound. So I would be like, and I would do that over and over and over and over and over again. It would get louder, it would get more grander. I could feel it in my body. It would stop the voices that are telling me things that I know are not things that I need to hold on to. I also shifted my environment, my home environment. Like for example, I chose this apartment that I'm living in because of the sunlight. Like right now, it's 10:14 in the morning. This sun is going to continue well in it'll continue straight, and my entire home is that way.
Mhm.
Sunlight, extremely important, extremely important. Get your sunlight. I also have a dog, so when the injury started to heal up, I would then be able to take very slow walks with her in the sunlight, in nature. Um, I also I would sometimes buy. I still have. They're all over actually. Actually, yeah. So I still do this. um, I I put all over the floor in my home. Every week I clean my home. I clean my whole home, and I would drop fake silk rose petals all over my home. So that way I'm always walking on rose petals, no matter what.
Okay, Princess Hakina.
Hello. Bark like a dog. But why you keep doing that? Damn it, you keep calling me. I swear, you be conjuring me. You be
A big dog.
that's okay. I don't like conjuring me. So you know, really getting creative with things. I increased my mirrors. I had no mirrors. And when I started to bring in the mirrors, I didn't recognize how scared I was at looking at myself. That was not the case before the accident.
Mm.
I could not look at myself. I could not look at my eyes. And I'm saying this and I'm taking a moment there because when I'm doing workshops, mirror work, and I'm asking people to look at themselves, it is very hard. Very hard. It's one of the hardest work in all of my work, in orgasm work, in erectile dysfunction, in you name it, in sexual trauma. It is so hard for a lot of people to look at themselves in the mirror. And specific to a few generations, specific to a few generations. New generations, it's a little different.